What do you think is important tonight?
Look, we know what Donald Trump is not going to say tonight. It's a good place to start. He's not going to talk about his plan to lower the cost of groceries. He's not going to talk about his plan to make it easier for first-time home buyers to actually be able to buy a home. He's not going to talk about his plan to be able to cut the cost of health care. And he's not going to talk about how he is protecting families from getting cheated or scammed on credit cards and mortgages and Venmo apps. He's not going to talk about any of that because that is not what Donald Trump is doing. Instead, here's a guy who you may remember ran for president saying, I would lower costs on day one for American families. On day one, those were his words. We're now 6 weeks in, and all he's doing is raising costs, raising them directly on, take a look at the cost of eggs, of groceries, what's going to happen to maple syrup, but also raising them indirectly by making families more vulnerable, by taking the financial cop off the beat, the CFPB, so that people all across this country can get scammed to the tune of literally billions of dollars.
Yeah, when you look at your role in that, on the one hand, many people are concerned about this sort of Trump-Musk set of cuts. On the other hand, something that you, along with Democrats in your party, President Obama, something you built clearly scares them, threatens them, and their allies and donors. Can you speak on that tonight, and what is the road ahead in that clash?
So remember that we had a bunch of consumer financial protection laws, but they were scattered among 7 different agencies. None of the agencies made them a first priority. And what happened? Somebody figured out you could break the law and sell a bunch of scammy mortgages, and frankly, nobody had come after you. And then that built up and built up and built up and made it into our entire banking system, caused a crash in 2008 that cost 10 million families their homes, and taxpayers had to shell out $700 billion to bail out giant financial institutions. We came out of that and said, never again. We built the Consumer Financial Protection Agency to be a cop on the beat, just to be there on all this financial stuff to enforce all of the laws that exist. The problem is that, here's the good news and bad news all in one. That consumer agency discovered over the last dozen years $21 billion in fraud against American families. And it made those companies return that money that had been fraudulently obtained directly to the families they cheated. Really good for American consumers, but not so good for the fraudsters, not so good for the billionaires who like making money off those scams. So they've been on the attack for this agency ever since before it was born. And now Elon Musk, who wants to launch his own financial product, X Money, is saying, I tell you what, how about we just get the financial cop out of the picture before he launches his financial product, and that way he won't have to worry about, things like following the law. That's what this fight is really about.
Senator Warren, it's Jen Psaki. I've been so excited to ask you about tariffs because you speak in English about a lot of these issues that everybody's trying to understand out there. So we hear a lot they're going to raise the cost of goods on people. We hear about industries. We hear about farmers. We hear about electricity. For people watching right now who are wondering, how's this going to impact me? How will it impact them? And when will they start to see the impact, do you expect?
So let me just start with it, if I can, Jen, just back up a tiny little bit. Tariffs can be a really valuable tool as one of the tools in our toolbox. So, for example, we need to be making more pharmaceuticals or drugs here at home instead of counting on foreign countries to do that or counting on China to supply all of the ingredients. We might put a tariff in place in part to protect a growing industry. We might want to get a supply chain back here in the United States, and we might use a tariff to protect it. But understand, just simply saying everything that comes in from Canada is going to get hit with a 25% tariff, you're going to feel it in a whole lot of different ways. You're going to feel it, I said earlier, you're going to feel it in your maple syrup, but you're going to feel it in things like lumber, which in turn affects housing and how many housing starts there are, how many new houses get built, and then what the price of those houses are. So this is one of those things. Target stood up today and said, hey, look, you put that 25% tariff on Mexico, and we're going to have a problem with the produce. We turn over our produce every 3 days, and a lot of that comes from Mexico. Prices are going to go up immediately. Some places you'll see it immediately, but if it stays in place across the board, it's going to hit in 1,000 ways that what you see overall is just prices have gone up. Remember, from a president who ran on he would bring prices down, who after he won said the reason he won was his promise to bring prices down. And now, talk about the world's ultimate bait and switch. He's off trying to increase prices for families rather than decrease them.
Let me ask you about some of the politics of what we're seeing going on right now and the backdrop of it, because there's a lot of activism out there. A lot of people are angry at Republican town halls across the country. There were reports today that the chairman of the NRCC that oversees the House races has told Republican candidates and members not to hold town halls. What do you make of that?
You know, what does that mean in a democracy? When one of the two major political parties in America says, in effect, the only way we're going to survive right now is if you don't go talk to the people you represent, if you don't hear from the people you represent. Why, if you were a member of Congress, would you say that and would you do that? And I actually think I know the answer. Remember, the House of Representatives and the Senate right now, under Republican leadership, are trying to move forward with something that is even more unpopular than the cuts you've already seen. And that is tax giveaways to billionaires paid for on the backs of hardworking American families. That was wildly unpopular last time around, and by golly, it's going to be wildly unpopular this time around. So instead of running the risk that some of those Republicans may actually hear what their constituents have to say about that, I think Republican leadership is saying, just put yourself in a bubble, stay away from that, because it is absolutely critical to the Republican leadership in Congress, to Donald Trump, and to Elon Musk to deliver those giant tax breaks for billionaires and make families pay for them. That's the central thrust of what's going on right now. Billionaires win, families lose.